The kidnapping and murder of 4-year-old Bokgabo Poo has sparked a conversation about early education, particularly about strangers, kidnapping as well as rape. Just how does a parent go about doing this, and what is the appropriate age to have the discussion? Well, I'm joined now by Ella Monakali from iLitha Labantu. Ella, good morning and thank you very much for your time. I must say, the latest reports have really left parents petrified, and many of them are now looking for ways to empower their children by perhaps having such conversations, but as early as 4 years old. Would it be the right age to even have such a conversation?
Good morning to you and your viewers. Absolutely. We at this current stage are encouraging parents to be more proactive and have those conversations with their kids. As uncomfortable as it may be for parents who have been brought up in the 1970s and 60s, but these are conversations that are essential for us to start having and making it a norm and a culture in our own households, so that before our children even go to ECDs or even go to schools, whereby they are taught by teachers and other NGOs, these are essential conversations to start having at home.
So if one starts the conversation around sexual assault, a parent would assume that then I need to start by having the conversation about sex itself, because that would be consensual, and then we move to sex which is not through consent. Would that be the case, or that would be a mistake?
That is the case. I think before we even dwell into, talking about sex and consent and all of that, we need to first identify the body parts and stop, sugarcoating what a body part is. Let's say you are having a conversation with a young girl. We need to start talking about inkomo, usisi. We need to actually start naming those body parts. We need to talk about vaginas. We need to talk about penises. We need to talk about breasts, so that our children start to grasp that these body parts are no-go areas for strangers and even my own relatives. So beyond just talking about sex, what sex is, what hormones are, and what consent is, we need to first start identify and naming those body parts.
Name them in the medical sense, not these child-friendly terms we've given them. We're actually joined by Shaheda Omar from the Teddy Bear Clinic. She's just joined us now. Shaheda, good morning and thank you very much for joining us. A very important conversation. We're talking about starting the conversation perhaps around sexual assault. Your view on this: should we be having the conversation with children as young as 3 or 4 years old, and how do we go about having it?
So, very important question. I think we need to be very cautious on how we approach children. We don't want to instill fear and anxiety in children. We already have a very anxious nation that are suffering with many mental disorders. So we need to be very clear on how we, focus and navigate this conversation. So the best way, and I think I agree with what my learned colleague has said too earlier, but we do talk, in terms of references, identification of the body parts is important, and moving away from idiosyncratic phrases. So using the names that are used in everyday language, but at the same time, so that the child understands, where we play games with children, with our very young children, 2 and older, 2.5 years, when they already have vocabulary and they're constructing short sentences. So speaking to them of the function of each body part, and also speaking to them about safe and unsafe touches. So what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, demonstrating pushing, shoving, pinching, pulling, so that they start understanding that is not safe, that is unsafe. But as my colleague spoke to the fact that making them appreciate and recognize that it doesn't matter who it is, whether it is a parent, whether it's an educator, whether it's an ECD practitioner, it's a relative, the next door neighbor, nobody is allowed to make them feel, and we use children's language where we say they feel yucky, they do not feel nice inside. So again, it's going through this consistently. It's not a once-off thing. And using, I think bedtime routines, bath time routines, eating. So what are you doing? And if somebody pushed food into your mouth, or they stuck their finger in your mouth, and that's how you actually navigate the conversation and play the what if game with children. So what if your friend John came and John pinched you on your bum? Is that okay? What if you've got a tummy ache and you're seeing the doctor, and the doctor is now looking into your vagina or touching your penis? Is that okay? I think those are the kind of frank, candid conversations one needs to have. But at the same time, one needs to be very careful that we do not want to create any kind of situation where children become overly anxious, fearful, and also instill guilt feelings, because sex and sexuality is something that is, one needs to propagate a positive attitude and connotation and cherish that, so they do not have these kind of feelings.
No, it's honestly going to need some sort of a cultural shift, particularly for parents. That's why I think maybe the conversation is so important, to empower the parents themselves as well to have the conversation. Because I know with many, there's the apprehension that if you start having the conversation with a 7-year-old, then would that not amount to early sexualization, and then the child wants to experiment? I don't know. What's your take, Ella?
I think building, once again, it's about the household and building a culture of openness with your children. We come from an age whereby we were not allowed to talk about these things. But I think because of the current situation and the heightenedness of rapes and sexual violence in our country, it's a must that we start talking about it. It's not about experimentation, but when you're frank with your children, when you're open with your children, to also kind of highlight some of the consequences. We can never take away that element of curiosity, but it's about the conversations that we are having in the household, so that when your children, start feeling those bodily changes, I'm comfortable enough to go to my parent to say, listen, these things have started growing in my body. I'm starting to experience such and such feelings. What do I do? So it's about creating an open culture or an open environment whereby a parent and a child could start actually engaging in these conversations. So having that openness and that open conversation is so important for children to build with their, parents, with their caregivers, with their, elderly grandmothers, but the people that are there who are caregivers of the children.
And then, Shaheda, for those parents that are honestly hopeless and really don't know where to start, does the Teddy Bear Clinic perhaps have such a facility where the parents can come with their children and perhaps you assist or facilitate that conversation as a start?
Indeed, and I think I'm so glad you raised that, because it's essential that we empower, enable parents, and disseminate the necessary information, because parenting does not come with an instruction manual, and talking about sex and sexuality is a taboo subject for most people, and it's very difficult when it comes to your own children, especially if you have not had those conversations yourself as a child. So yes, we do provide those kind of support structures. We do navigate conversations. And I think, just in response to Ella, it's creating a platform of permission that children know. We know children have so many questions, and they actually don't know where to reach out, how to reach out. So what do? They go to the internet, they go to their friends, peer support, and it's not always an accurate reflection of what they need to know or understanding. So if they go to responsible adults, their caregivers, their parents, they know that if parents respond positively, and even if parents acknowledge, I'm feeling quite embarrassed, this is a difficult conversation for me to have, but I'm going to try and engage with you, and I would appreciate it that whenever you have any concerns, let's look at information, let's look at things that we cannot talk about, that I will try and establish more facts around it. So that also gives the child permission that even my parent is struggling, so it's okay to talk about it, and my parent is giving me the way forward in terms of addressing any future concerns or questions, the developmental curiosity. I think that is critical that parents speak to this, because it's normal. It's part of the growing up process, the sexual debuts that we find children experimenting in. So the more information they have, the more knowledgeable they are, and the more liberated and the more empowered they are to make positive choices and decisions regarding being violated, but also finding themselves in a position to make a disclosure and seek support and intervention should the need arise. Thank you.
Shaheda, thank you very much
May I
for
also
your time. Yes, you can, just in closing.
May I also just quickly also just add on what Dr. Shaheda just said. As an organization, we also have positive parenting workshops for parents to kind of guide these kind of conversations. We also have a family enrichment program, which looks at the entire family as a unit, whereby children can always check in, make reference to, have somebody to speak to. So those are the kind of workshops and conferences that we hold for parents to kind of navigate this uncomfortable space or unfamiliar space. Thank you.
No, thank you very much to you, Ella, as well as Shaheda. Those ladies are from, we have the Teddy Bear Clinic, as well as Ella Monakali from iLitha Labantu.